The house where 4-year-old Dannarriah Finley lived in Orange, Texas, is no longer there, having been destroyed by Hurricane Rita in 2005. But the pain and the memories wrought by the little girl's abduction and murder in 2002 will forever haunt the neighborhood, the community, and her family, who are still looking for answers. 23 years later, Dannarriah's case sits in a box in a basement. Hello, and welcome to Box in the Basement podcast. I'm your host, Arlene.
And I'm Leah.
In the last 50 years, the U.S. has had nearly 1 million homicides, and since then, over 250,000 cases sit in a box in a basement where all hopes for justice go to die. In 1996, someone shot my uncle Leon Laurelis, changing my life forever and leaving a devastating hole in my heart, and his case remains unsolved. Join me and my wife, Leah, as we shed light on these forgotten victims, their life, the loved ones they left behind, the evidence, and the theories of who committed these crimes, leaving communities in fear and leaving families without answers. Support our effort to change the justice system through the Homicide Families Victims' Rights Act, as we hope to make a difference with our audience as we remember the victims and demand justice. In 1996, my world was shattered when my uncle Leon Laurelis was shot execution style in a small town in Texas. To this day, his murder remains unsolved, and the pain of that injustice continues to haunt me, my family, and Leon's friends and coworkers. Here at Box in the Basement, we want to shed light on the overwhelming number of unsolved murders and disappearances here in Texas and beyond. We want to bring awareness to the lesser-known cases that got little to no attention, in hopes that someone listening will come forward with any information, because we strongly believe all lives matter. Ultimately, we want to get justice for Leon and for all the victims whose cases are sitting, collecting dust in a box in a basement. Please note that this episode contains depictions of violence that some people may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Please like and follow our pages on all social media platforms for Box in the Basement Podcast and Justice for Leon Laurelis. And now you can also find us on YouTube.
2002 saw the introduction of the euro as the official currency in 12 European countries. American journalist Daniel Pearl was murdered in Pakistan by al-Qaeda. Former FBI agent Robert Hansen was sentenced to life in prison for selling classified information to Russia. And astronaut Buzz Aldrin punched a conspiracy theorist in the face. The Patriots won their first Super Bowl. Halle Berry became the first black actress to win the Oscar for Best Actress for her role in Monsters Ball, and Kelly Clarkson won the first American Idol. Nelly's Hot in Here topped the Billboard Hot 100 the week of July 4th, 2002. George Strait had the #1 country song with Living and Living Well, and Mr. Deeds was #1 at the box office that week. Low-rise jeans were all the rage in 2002, along with cargo pants, trucker hats, platform flip-flops, and puffy vests. Orange, Texas, part of the Beaumont-Port Arthur metropolitan area, is a small town in the far southeast corner of the state on the border of Louisiana. Around 19,000 people call Orange home today, and that number would have been just slightly lower in 2002. Orange's population grew up around the 17 sawmills located within the city limits, and then later expanded again once the port was dredged to allow large vessels entry. After the Great Depression wrecked the local economy, the construction of a U.S. naval station brought numerous jobs to the area. Today, the economy is much more diverse, relying on manufacturing, petrochemical products, shipping, and logistics services. It is unfortunately prone to the effects of storms in the Gulf of Mexico, having been devastated by hurricanes Rita, Ike, and Harvey, among others.
Dannarriah Finley was born on July 22, 1997, in Orange, Texas, to Johnny Edwards and Jamie Arnold. Dannarriah had three sisters, ages 2, 6, and 8 at the time of this incident in 2002. Dannarriah, lovingly called Fat Legs by her family, attended the pre-kindergarten program at North Early Learning Center. She loved eating at McDonald's and playing at the park, where she preferred the slides. She was a sweet-natured girl who loved school and got along with everyone. Just weeks away from her 5th birthday, Dannarriah spent the evening of July 3rd in the company of her family. She was at her home with her 2 siblings and 3 cousins. Dannarriah's mother, Jamie, worked late in that evening, and it being summer break, the kids stayed up late as well. According to Jamie, she put all the kids to bed at around 1:30 a.m. She checked on all the kids again at around 4 a.m. before heading to bed herself. And all was well. Everyone was accounted for. Dannarriah, sleeping soundly in her flowered tank top and purple sleep shorts. Jamie got up at 10 a.m., checked on the sleeping kids again, and saw that the 4-year-old was no longer in her bed. Jamie quickly searched the family home to see if the little girl had gotten herself up, but there was no sign of her. She called relatives to see if someone had come by and picked her up, but none had. Panic set in, and Jamie called the police to report her daughter missing. The Orange County Police Department acted quickly and immediately organized searches. At one point early in the investigation, 500 people went out on foot and in ATVs and helicopters to search for Dannarriah. The Texas EquiSearch deployed a team to assist as well. Volunteers and professionals went block to block and house to house, looked in every ditch, behind every shed, and in every abandoned property, but nothing turned up.
Early in the search for a missing child, there's always the hope that they were kidnapped by a disgruntled family member or maybe wandered off on their own, and they'll turn up alive and well.
And statistically, that is the case. Over 99% of children reported missing return home alive. So it's not unreasonable for Dannarriah's family and the local PD to believe this was the case. In an interview just days after Dannarriah went missing, Tim Miller of the Texas EquiSearch relayed a case he'd worked on recently where a young girl was missing for 16 days and was then found alive. Jamie publicly pleaded for Dannarriah's kidnappers to return her, offering to meet up in a Walmart parking lot with no police present and no questions asked. She just wanted her baby back.
For 3 days, volunteers and law enforcement professionals gathered in the parking lot of the Mount Zion Church in Orange to plan their efforts for the day. But it would be a pipeline worker 27 miles away in Port Arthur who would discover
Dannarriah's
remains in a dredge pipeline ditch. She was mostly nude and partially decomposed. The medical examiner determined that her cause of death was strangulation and that she had been sexually assaulted prior to her death. Port Arthur Police and Orange County Police acted quickly and descended on the scene where little Dannarriah was found, and they were able to recover a surprising amount of evidence from nearby, including her discarded pajamas and a bed sheet that investigators believed was used to wrap
Dannarriah.
up the night she was abducted. Immediately, Orange Police distributed pictures of this bed sheet, hoping it would encourage someone to speak up or come forward with information. And it did indeed generate several good leads that provided some additional context and information. Despite being exposed to the elements and wildlife in the area, I remember reading that there was an alligator hanging out nearby that had to be euthanized so they could get to some evidence. Investigators were also able to collect evidence from
Dannarriah's
remains and clothing to include DNA samples. They didn't collect a whole lot of DNA for evidence, but they did get some, enough to test and save for future use in any case.
Texas Ranger Brandon Bess said in 2022 that some of the items in evidence had not been tested by today's standards. And that is most definitely true. DNA analysis has come a long way since 2002, and as we recently learned, it's not like labs constantly check old evidence for matches. Bess said that several pieces of evidence were going to be retested or tested for the first time, but that was 3 years ago, and I haven't been able to find any updates on that angle. By the same token, Bess said that it will probably take a confession or a witness coming forward to break this case open. Dannarriah's family was questioned. Her mother, obviously, since she was in the house at the time she disappeared. I know there was some concern around Jamie because she'd had CPS called on her recently for improper supervision of her kids. But it wasn't serious enough for a situation that it warranted the removal of her children, or charges being filed, or anything. Jamie was actually in the process of being set up for legitimate assistance, parenting classes, financial management classes, that kind of a thing, when Dannarriah went missing.
And the case ended up being dismissed in 2004 anyway. CPS decided the family was doing better in that regard. So, quick question, do we know who was in the house with the kids earlier that night? I read somewhere that Jamie was remarried at the time, so was stepdad there, or an older cousin, or another family member?
I honestly don't know. I couldn't find that information. I would assume that someone else was with the kids that night, but I don't know who it was. Dannarriah's father, Johnny, lived in Starks, Louisiana, which is about a 25-minute drive from Orange, Texas. Johnny was supposed to pick up Dannarriah later in the day on July 4th as part of his visitation agreement. They were going to set off fireworks for the holiday and as kind of an early birthday celebration. Johnny saw Dannarriah regularly, and from what I've read, it doesn't seem that there was much, if any, animosity between him and her mother, Jamie. So law enforcement ruled out the possibility that this was a matter of the non-custodial parent kidnapping a child out of desperation or anger or spite.
And truthfully, that's way more common than stranger abduction. So it's only reasonable to consider that as a possibility. The issue here is that none of the DNA that we know exists has matched anyone on file. And I would assume that it would have been tested against people in her immediate circle right off the bat, but you never know.
Yes, so far, there have been no matches.
And we do know some of the items from the crime scene were retested a few years ago, but still no matches.
Police continued questioning people in the area, including a list of registered sex offenders, one of whom was living just a few doors down from Dannarriah's family at the time of her disappearance. Now, this is a family of modest means, but Dannarriah's father was desperate to get answers. So desperate, he offered up his own car as a reward for information. As the 3 years went on, investigators compared DNA to local sex offenders, researched fibers found on Dannarriah's body, but nothing matched, and no answers came. Various articles say that there is at least one person of interest, but because this is an open investigation, we don't have any idea who that might be. There were also security and surveillance videos from businesses in the family's neighborhood, but nothing of value has been gleaned from those tapes. Not to say it couldn't later on if investigators get more information, though. The DA has revisited this case numerous times over the years, and while there is physical evidence available, and there are persons of interest, there's never quite been enough to take it to a grand jury.
I know we've talked about how you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, but I think law enforcement and the DA office just really want to get their shit together here. This is a 4-year-old child, and there are circumstances that would make this a tricky case to navigate in court. Dannarriah's body was found almost 30 miles from home in a ditch. She was decomposed and she was exposed to the elements. I get it that law enforcement wants to be absolutely sure they can nail someone's ass to the wall here. In an article from 2004, it appears law enforcement was close to an arrest. They went so far in an interview to say that they believed they knew who the perpetrator was, but again, the DA didn't take it to a grand jury. In any case, that's where we stand today, nearly 23 years into the investigation. So what happened to Dannarriah Finley in the early morning hours of July 4th, 2002?
In my opinion, there's really only two options here. She was taken by someone who knew her, or was taken by a stranger. She was only 4 years old. This isn't like when we cover adults or older kids. She didn't run away to go start a new life or sneak out to go to a party or meet a boy. She was asleep in her bed at 4 a.m. And then by 10, she was gone. I tend to believe that she was taken by someone who knew her, or was at least familiar with her to know their way around the house and know what Dannarriah looked like. And there are a few reasons for this. First, it is exceedingly rare for people to just go into random houses and steal kids. It certainly does happen, but it's not typical. It's especially rare for a single child to be taken out of a room where multiple kids are sleeping. That leads me to my next point. Dannarriah didn't scream out for help when she was taken from her room, and none of the other kids reported anything strange. If Dannarriah knew the person who took her, she would probably be less likely to create a disturbance, and it would be easier to lure her out of a room full of kids if that's how this person went about it. And then lastly, if it was a neighbor, family friend, or even a relative, they would have been more likely to make a beeline for the kids' room. A stranger would have been more likely to make noise, bump into things, open multiple doors, and risk waking up Dannarriah's mother, someone who knew their way around the house and knew where Dannarriah slept would have had a much easier time getting her out of the house.
Do you think it might be possible that
Dannarriah.
did go outside on her own? If she was put to bed in her room at 1 a.m., that's 8.5 hours that elapsed between bedtime and the time Jamie realized she wasn't in her bed. I don't know how many of you have ever shared living space with a 4-year-old, but they get up early. Even if they go to bed at 1:30, their little butts are up yelling about breakfast or trying to find where you hid the iPad by 6. I've never met a 4-year-old that slept until 10 a.m. Now, I'm sure they exist. I'm just saying it would be unusual unless by some miracle Jamie had worked some sort of magic over the years. Maybe
Dannarriah.
got up and wandered outside, or maybe she simply left her room and went to the living room or somewhere else in the house.
I'd say if she was the victim of a stranger abduction, or if someone had been watching her in the neighborhood, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, this would be how it happened. I think it's unlikely, for the reasons I listed a minute ago, that a stranger would have scooped her up out of bed. But if she'd had gotten herself up and left the bedroom, that's a whole different story. I've seen it mentioned that Jamie sometimes left her front door unlocked because her mother would stop by. If that were the case that evening, then someone could have definitely taken advantage of the situation and let themselves inside. Maybe Dannarriah was playing by herself in another room. Similarly, it would have been easier for a small child to open the door and wander outside if it was unlocked.
And why Dannarriah in particular? If there were, one, two, three, four, 5 kids asleep in the room of various ages, why single her out? It definitely makes more sense if she wasn't in the bed or even in the bedroom at all, but again, that's speculation. Me trying to apply reason and logic to something completely irrational and illogical.
That does make sense, though. I don't know the setup of the kids' room. If they were all in a cuddle puddle in one bed or on the floor, it would seem extremely difficult to single out one kid. Even if they were split between a couple of beds, it seems so strange.
Investigators have also theorized that multiple people were involved.
Right. And if that's true, then it probably would have been even easier to get away with something like this. And it also increases the chances someone slips up and talks. With my own uncle's case, that has definitely happened over the years. Someone brags at a party, or someone's conscience starts bothering them, and they tell a friend or spouse, something like that.
What if this was some kind of beef, some disgruntled family member or neighbor or something like that?
That's a possibility, and it would answer some of the questions we have and address some of the theories law enforcement has. Like we've said, stranger kidnappings are very rare. If it was someone that was known to the family, like maybe didn't know Dannarriah, but knew the family, knew there would be kids in the house, maybe even knew the front door would likely be unlocked, knew that taking one of the kids out of their own bedroom would be enough to scare the family or exact revenge or whatever the goal was.
Right. We just don't really have any indication from the family interviews that anyone had a problem with them. But sometimes there are crazy folks out there who think that they've been done wrong and feel like they need to get revenge.
Yes, exactly. The circumstances here and the general lack of evidence just make the possibilities so wide reaching.
And this is compounded by the fact that the family's house was destroyed in a hurricane in 2005. The whole neighborhood was damaged, but from what I've been able to find out, a tree fell through the roof of the house where Dannarriah was living. So any searches of the house and any evidence that came from the house is it. That's all we have and all we're ever going to get from that angle. I tend to agree with law enforcement that the only way this case is going to get solved is if somebody comes forward with information. Of course, there's always a chance the evidence could reveal who did it, but I think it's more likely that it's going to take a confession or a witness to get answers.
If you have any information on the rape and murder of 4-year-old Dannarriah Finley in the summer of 2002, please contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-252-TIPS. That's 1-800-252-8477.
Just a reminder that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, National Child Abuse Prevention Month, and Stress Awareness Month. If you'd like more information or need resources for support, please see the show notes for more details.
Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the podcast creators, host, and guest. If you or someone you know is a victim of crime, support is available. Call 855-4-VICTIM to speak with someone who can help you understand your rights and options. Visit victimconnect.org to learn more. We are excited to announce that we are now a part of the Darkcast Network. Darkcast Network, the best in indie podcasts. Check out all the great shows at darkcastnetwork.com.
Picture this. You're standing at the peak of a mountain, watching the sunrise paint the world in shades of gold. That feeling? Pure magic. The kind that makes every grueling step worth it. But what happens when that adventure takes a turn for the worse? When the trail isn't what you expected, and the great outdoors shows just how wild it can be? That's where Tragedy with a View comes in. I'm your host, Kayla, and in this podcast, I tell the stories of adventures gone wrong in some of the most beautiful and unpredictable places on Earth. From natural disasters that catch even the most seasoned explorers off guard, to true crime trails that unfold where tranquility meets terror. We dive into these close calls with disaster that remind us just how small we really are. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. Every story comes with a perspective, a chance to reflect on the fragility and wonder of life. After all, what is life without close calls with disaster? So if you're the kind of person who loves a good adventure and doesn't shy away from a little chaos along the way, tune in to Tragedy with a View. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Grab your hiking boots, your sense of wonder, and maybe a little caution. And join me as we explore the untamed beauty of the world, one story at a time.
If you think bringing unsolved cases is important, then please take a moment to rate and review our podcast. Also, please like and follow our pages on all social media platforms for Box in the Basement podcasts and Justice for Leon Laurelis. You can now also find us on YouTube. If you like what you hear, please do us a favor and subscribe. It would help so much, my lovelies. Also, please share this episode so we can bring awareness to these lesser-known cases so we can reach more people in hopes that someone who may know something will come forward. I'd also like to ask that you sign my petition for my Uncle Leon Laurelis' case to be reopened and reviewed with fresh eyes. And you can find our petition on change.org. This podcast has a bigger purpose than just providing information and entertainment. The Homicide Victims' Families' Rights Act is a bipartisan bill that was signed into law by Congress in 2021, and we want to see it put into action. This law establishes a systematic process for reviewing case files related to cold case murders. The focus is on providing a mechanism for the families and friends of murder victims to request a formal review of such cases. I also have a GoFundMe page to hire an attorney to help me get a copy of his autopsy that I have been denied for 27 years. You can find the GoFundMe by searching for Leon Laureles. That's Laureles. But to get his body exhumed, to search for evidence that was not collected the first time around. We and other families and friends need assistance with getting FOIA requests. It blows our minds that so many murders occurred from 1976 to 1997 in Brownwood, Texas, under the watch of the same investigators responsible for handling Leon's case. We're going to look at all the unsolved murders in Brownwood and maybe even a few solved ones if it helps uncover what was happening in that era that left so many families devastated and a community living in fear. Thank you for joining us. Be kind. Later, Gators.